On a quiet street where nothing bad was supposed to happen, a man began knocking on every door. He never spoke. And not everyone who answered was ever seen again. It was a quiet street in a town that believed in its own safety. A place where locked doors felt unnecessary. Where people greeted strangers without hesitation. But one autumn evening, a shadow began to move between the houses. He knocked on every door. He never spoke. And not everyone who opened their door was seen again. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. She was 32 years old. A teacher. The kind of teacher whose voice could calm the storm in the most restless child. Born in the small town of Harrow's End, she had never truly left it. Her childhood was a mix of wide-open fields, Sunday church bells, and the comforting smell of her grandmother's kitchen. She believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in the good that she thought existed inside everyone. When her father died, she carried his lessons like an unshakable compass. Kindness first, fear never. To the children she taught, she was a safe harbor. To the parents, she was trust made flesh. That morning, the sky was the pale gray of unspoken warnings. Sarah walked to school with a paper cup of tea in her hand. She noticed the man for the first time near the edge of the park. He stood too still for someone simply waiting. His eyes did not follow the movement of the street. They stayed fixed, like a photograph that refused to change. When she passed him, he looked away. That was the last moment Sarah felt completely at ease. His name, no one really knew at first. He appeared in Harrow's End 3 weeks earlier. He rented a small room above the old hardware store. Paid in cash. Never asked for receipts. The neighbors saw him in fragments, stepping out at odd hours, carrying no bags, speaking to no one. He had a way of looking at people without truly looking. Like he was cataloging them. One woman said she felt her skin crawl when he passed her on the narrow pavement. Another swore she saw him standing outside her gate in the rain, motionless, long after midnight. The first disappearance happened on a Thursday. A boy named Dean, just 15. He was last seen cutting through the alley that led to the disused railway yard. The police asked questions. They knocked on doors. No one mentioned the man in the alley, because no one thought he mattered. 2 nights later, the knocking began. A slow, deliberate sound. Each door. One by one. When the residents answered, he would stand there. Silent. Sometimes his head was slightly tilted, as if listening to something far away. He never explained. And after a few seconds, he would turn and walk away. The local police wrote it off as a prank. Sarah heard the knocking too. It was just after 10 on a Tuesday night. The sound was hollow, almost polite. She opened the door halfway. The man stood under the weak glow of the porch light. Rain dripped from the brim of his dark cap. His coat hung heavy, darker at the sleeves. His hands were pale against the black fabric. And his eyes. They were not cold but empty. The kind of empty that felt bottomless. She waited for him to speak. He did not. Her throat felt tight. Her hand tightened around the doorframe. Then, without a word, he stepped back into the darkness and was gone. By morning, word spread that Mrs. Keating, 2 houses down, had vanished during the night. Her door had been left open. The lamp in her living room was still on. The tea on her table was cold. The chair she had been sitting in was tipped over. Police finally began to look closer at the man in the hardware storeroom. But by the time they went to question him, the room was empty. No clothes. No bags. Nothing except a single sheet of paper on the table. It was blank. Sarah could not sleep. Every creak of the old house felt amplified. She began to see him everywhere. At the far end of the street, in the reflection of shop windows, across the playground fence as she watched the children leave for the day. Once, she thought she saw his shadow in her hallway when she came home. But the house was locked. And the hallway was empty. The town became a place of locked doors and drawn curtains. No one answered late knocks anymore. But the sound still came. And when it did, Hearts pounded behind walls. It was a Thursday night when Sarah's fear turned into action. She was grading papers in her small kitchen when the knock came. It was different this time. 3 sharp strikes. Not slow. Not polite. She froze. The air in the room felt heavier. Her pulse hammered in her ears. From the window, she saw nothing on the porch. The knock came again. And again. She stood, barely breathing. The old floorboards beneath her feet seemed to groan louder than the sound itself. She stepped to the door and pressed her eye to the peephole. He was there. Closer than ever. His face filled the frame. No cap this time. His hair was damp, clinging to his forehead. His lips were parted, just slightly, as if he might speak. But he did not. Instead, his eyes moved, scanning something behind her, as if he could see through the walls. Sarah stepped back. Her heel caught the leg of the kitchen chair, sending it scraping across the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. And that was when he smiled. Not wide. Not kind. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips that made her stomach twist. The third knock came, harder than before. The frame of the door rattled. Sarah's breath caught. Her hands shook as she reached for the latch. She knew she should not open it. She knew. But something, a mix of dread and defiance, pulled her closer. Her fingers touched the cold metal. And then, the sound of footsteps behind her. Inside the house. Where no one else should have been. Sarah did not turn around at first. Her body felt locked in place, every muscle rigid, as if her bones had turned to stone. The footsteps were soft, deliberate, moving across the uneven wood of her hallway. The sound was coming closer. She could hear the faint brush of fabric, something heavy, like a coat dragging against the wall. Her heart was so loud she could barely hear the air moving in and out of her lungs. The man outside was still there. She could feel him. The shadow through the frosted glass had not moved. But someone, or something, was behind her. She turned slowly. The hallway stretched into darkness. The light from the kitchen barely reached the edges, leaving the far end swallowed in shadow. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She wanted to call out, to demand who was there, but her throat felt raw, unable to form sound. Then, from the darkness, a shape emerged. Tall. Still. The dim light caught the glint of something metallic in his hand. It was not a weapon she could recognize, but it was heavy, old, almost rusted. The figure did not move any closer. He simply stood there, head tilted slightly, the same way the man at the door had tilted his. Her skin prickled. It was as if the man inside and the man outside were mirrors of each other. The knock came again, harder this time, and the sound seemed to shake the whole house. Sarah's breath hitched. The figure in the hallway turned his head toward the door, slowly, like a predator scenting prey. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. The bulbs above her hummed and buzzed, casting the kitchen in a strobe of dim light and darkness. When the light steadied, the hallway was empty. Sarah's chest ached from the force of her breathing. She backed toward the counter, grabbing the first thing her hand touched, a kitchen knife. Her grip was unsteady. She felt the cool metal against her palm, grounding her, reminding her she was still awake, still alive. Outside, the shadow shifted. It moved closer to the glass. She could see the outline of his head now, the sharp slope of his shoulders. For a long moment, there was nothing. No knocking. No footsteps. Just stillness. And then, a voice. It was low, almost a whisper, but clear enough to cut through the heavy air. "Let me in, Sarah." Her name. Spoken with the softness of someone who knew her. Someone who should not know her. Her knees weakened. The knife shook in her hand. She stepped back again, her shoulder hitting the fridge door. She could feel the cold seeping through her thin sweater. She wanted to scream for help, but her voice still would not obey her. The voice came again, this time from inside the house. From the darkness of the hallway. "Let me in." Sarah's chest tightened. Her mind raced. There were two of them. Or one of him. And something else. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, like soil after rain, but stronger, heavier, as though it clung to her skin. The sound of slow, deliberate breathing filled the space between the knocks. She could hear it in front of her, and behind her, and she realized there was nowhere to run without moving toward one of them. Her eyes darted toward the back door, the one that led to the small garden. It was only a few steps away. She moved quickly, bare feet whispering against the cold floor. Her fingers reached for the handle, and froze. The glass in the back door reflected the kitchen, and in that reflection, standing just behind her, was the man from the porch. His face was pale. His eyes were darker than the night outside, and his mouth was still curled into that same slow, deliberate smile. She spun around. The kitchen was empty. The hallway was empty. But the knocking began again. This time, not at the front door. It came from somewhere deeper inside the house. Closer. Louder. Like it was coming from the walls themselves. Sarah's legs felt numb, but she forced herself forward, gripping the knife so tightly that her knuckles ached. She followed the sound, step by slow step, until she reached the narrow door that led to the basement. The knocking stopped. She stood there, staring at the door, her breath clouding in the air, even though the house had been warm only minutes ago. A faint scratching sound came from the other side. Then, a whisper. So close it felt like it was at her ear. "Let me in, Sarah." Her vision swam. She pressed her back against the wall, unable to tear her eyes from the basement door. The sound of footsteps began again, from upstairs this time. She could hear them crossing her bedroom floor. Then the slow creak of her wardrobe door opening. The hangers shifting. The breathing. Her phone was on the counter. She lunged for it, nearly dropping the knife. The screen lit up. No signal. Just a black bar where her connection should be. She tried anyway, pressing the buttons with trembling fingers, the plastic slick with sweat. The footsteps upstairs stopped. Silence. Then the sound of something, or someone, coming down the stairs. Slow. Unhurried. As if whoever it was knew she had nowhere to go. Her chest heaved. She backed into the corner, the knife still in her hand, the phone clutched in the other. The shadows at the bottom of the stairs shifted. And from the darkness, two hands appeared first. Pale. Still. Then the head. The same eyes. The same smile. The kitchen light flickered again. And in that split second of darkness, another shadow appeared behind him. Identical. Both of them staring at her. Both smiling. Both beginning to step forward. The cold metal of the knife bit into her palm as her grip tightened. Her breath came fast, shallow, almost painful. The air between them felt heavy, charged, like it was holding its breath along with her. The two figures closed the distance. The light flickered once more, and this time when it came back on, they were only inches away. Sarah's back pressed so hard against the cold wall that she could feel the uneven bumps of old plaster through her sweater. The air between her and the two men, or the two versions of the same man, felt wrong, thick, like it was pushing against her lungs. They stood perfectly still. Their faces were identical down to the smallest detail. The wet strands of hair, the shallow crease at the corner of their mouths, the faint sheen of moisture on their skin. Only their eyes moved. Both sets, fixed on her, unblinking. The one on the left tilted his head slowly, as if studying her reaction. The other stepped forward by a single, deliberate inch. The floorboards under his foot groaned in the silence. It was the only sound in the room. Sarah's grip on the knife trembled, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming sense that no matter how hard she fought, she would not leave this house alive. The smell was stronger now. Not just damp earth, but something else beneath it. Metallic. Warm. The scent filled her nose and seemed to cling to the back of her throat, coating it in a way that made her want to gag. Blood. The figure closest to her slowly raised his hand. The motion was deliberate, every inch stretched out, as though he wanted her to watch it happen. His fingers unfolded one by one, pale and almost too long. And in his palm, something small and delicate glinted in the kitchen light. A silver earring. Sarah's earring. The one she had lost 3 nights ago and dismissed as nothing. Her stomach twisted. Her knees nearly buckled. She remembered the way she had searched for it under the bed, the way she had assumed it had simply fallen somewhere she would never find. But now it was here. In his hand. Which meant he had been here. In this house. In her bedroom. Watching her. The second man's smile deepened, just slightly. He took a single step toward her. His boot left a wet print on the floor. Not from rainwater. The liquid was darker. Thicker. It spread slowly, trailing behind him like a shadow that bled. Her mind screamed at her to run. Her body would not listen. She felt trapped inside herself, her pulse roaring in her ears, drowning out everything else. And then, from somewhere deeper in the house, the knocking began again. Hard. Fast. Pounding against the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as though the entire house had a heartbeat, and it was growing faster. The men did not turn toward the sound. Their eyes never left hers. The pounding grew louder, until it seemed to come from everywhere at once, from inside her head. The walls around her seemed to tremble. A thin crack appeared in the plaster above the doorway, a faint line that widened with each violent knock. Dust drifted down in slow, lazy spirals. The man holding her earring closed his fist around it. The faint sound of metal bending echoed in the room, though his grip looked effortless. When he opened his hand again, the earring was twisted, broken into an unrecognizable curl of silver. Sarah's breath came in ragged bursts. She could feel the tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. Not while they were watching her like this, like she was prey cornered in her own home. The pounding stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, suffocating, pressing against her from every direction. And in that silence, a sound emerged from somewhere above them. A soft, dragging scrape. Like something being pulled across the floor. The 2 men looked upward in perfect unison. Their necks turned at the same angle, their heads tilting as if listening to something only they could hear. The scraping moved closer to the top of the stairs. Then it stopped. The light flickered. Once. Twice. When it steadied, there was a third figure at the top of the stairs. No movement. No sound. Just a tall, dark outline, its features lost in shadow, except for the eyes. They were the same as the others. Identical. And they were looking directly at her. Her chest tightened so much she thought she might black out. The room seemed to narrow, the walls inching closer. Every instinct screamed that if she let them take one more step, she would never be seen again. The figure at the top of the stairs began to descend. Slow. Measured. The wood creaked under each footfall. The 2 men in the kitchen did not move to stop him. They simply waited, their eyes still locked on hers, as if the moment she feared most was not their approach, but what would happen once all 3 of them stood before her. The scraping sound returned. Not from upstairs now. From inside the walls. It surrounded her, filled her head, until she could not tell where it began or ended. It was closer than her own heartbeat. Closer than her own breath. The third figure reached the bottom step. In the flickering light, his face came into view. It was hers. Her own face. Pale. Expressionless. Eyes empty. Mouth curved into the same slow, deliberate smile. Sarah's hand loosened on the knife. Her knees wavered. And as the smile deepened, the pounding began again. Not on the doors, not on the walls, but inside her chest. A force that felt like it was trying to break out. The 3 of them stepped forward together. Her vision blurred. The air grew colder. The smell of damp earth and blood was all around her now, inside her, filling her. Her fingers went numb. The knife slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. And in the last second before the light went out completely, she felt a hand, cold, damp, and impossibly strong, close over her mouth from behind. Her scream never left her throat. The cold hand pressed down, sealing her breath, forcing her lungs to fight for air. The skin was damp, as if it had just been pulled from deep soil, and it carried that same suffocating scent of earth and iron. Her eyes widened, straining in the dark, searching for the faces in front of her. They were still there. 3 identical smiles in the flickering half-light. The grip on her mouth tightened, and something sharp scraped along her cheek, slow and deliberate. She felt the faint sting, then the warmth of blood trailing down toward her jaw. The figure behind her leaned closer. His breath was cold, as though it carried winter into her ear. "You left the door unlocked," the whisper said. Her body jolted. It was her own voice. The words crawled through her mind, burrowing deep, twisting the edges of her thoughts until she could not tell if she had just heard them, or thought them. The 3 in front of her stepped closer, their movements in perfect synchrony. Their boots left wet, dark prints on the kitchen floor. Prints that did not fade, but spread, the liquid seeping outward like ink bleeding through paper. Sarah tried to wrench herself free, but the arm around her tightened, pulling her back into the unseen body behind her. Her head knocked against something hard, a chest that felt solid as stone. Her lungs burned. She could feel her own pulse pounding against the grip at her face. The lights above her buzzed, then flared brighter than before. For an instant, the entire room was awash in a harsh white glow. And in that instant, she saw the truth. The 3 men were not standing on the floor. Their feet hovered inches above it. The dark liquid dripping from them fell straight down, vanishing before it touched the wood. The brightness died, plunging the kitchen back into a sickly, flickering yellow. The man with her earring opened his fist again. This time, it was not the twisted silver he held, but something small, soft, and unmistakably human. A lock of hair. Blonde. Her own. Her stomach turned violently. The pounding in the walls returned, but it was faster now, frantic, as though the entire house was collapsing inward. Dust rained from the ceiling. The crack above the door split wider, a jagged mouth in the plaster. From inside it, something moved. Something pale, with too many fingers. The 3 figures in front of her tilted their heads back in unison, their eyes rolling upward toward the ceiling. And then, for the first time, one of them spoke. His voice was deep, but thin, the sound of something dead trying to remember how to talk. "It is time." The grip on her mouth vanished, but before she could scream, another hand, this one hot, almost burning, clamped around her wrist. Her skin hissed under the touch. The pain shot up her arm, white and electric, forcing the air from her lungs in a silent gasp. The figure at the top of the stairs, the one wearing her face, stepped forward at last. Her eyes met its eyes, and she felt something pull inside her, like invisible hooks sinking deep into her chest. Her thoughts blurred. Her memories flashed in broken shards. Her father's funeral, the smell of her grandmother's pie, the laughter of her students. Each one seemed to dim, to drain away, until she was not sure they had ever belonged to her at all. The kitchen light failed completely. The dark was absolute, thick enough to feel on her skin. The pounding stopped. So did the breathing. Only one sound remained, the slow, deliberate creak of the floorboards, moving toward her. One step. Another. And another. A whisper came again, surrounding her, inside her, impossible to locate. "You opened the door." Something icy touched her forehead. Her body locked. The cold spread downward, flooding her veins, swallowing the heat from her chest to her fingertips. Her vision sparked, a burst of white, then black again. Her knees gave way, but the hands held her up. In the distance, or maybe just inside her mind, she thought she heard another knock. Only this time, it was not on her door. It was on someone else's. The last thing Sarah saw before the darkness took her was her own reflection in the kitchen window. Smiling.